All right, welcome ladies and gentlemen, chapter 15, some video lecture. This is on agriculture methods and pest management. I'd like you to go ahead and draw this diagram here that's on this slide. And by the end of it, of this lecture, you'll hopefully be able to detail some of these connection points. If you have any concerns or questions on these connection points, be sure to ask me questions. All right, let's get started. Okay, so there's a clip on the future of food, and I'll include the link in the electronic agenda. If you're able to copy and paste this YouTube link in yourself, that would be great. Otherwise, I'll put it in the electronic agenda. One of the things that how agriculture's changed in the last 100 years is through machines, human labor versus machines. So in industrialized countries, you're going to see mechanized agriculture. So that's going to be a huge amount of fossil fuel being used instead of human muscle power. And then a large amount of energy and flat land is required for this. And it often results in this monoculture, which monocultures mean, literally means a single plant. And then this is because it results in effective planting, cultivating, and harvesting. And then farmers rely on hybrids to provide a more uniform monoculture. We talk about the Green Revolution a lot in this class, and the Green Revolution is basically since the 1950s, and due to this mechanized agriculture, in addition to fertilizer, we have seen an increase in worldwide production of food, which is great. That means more people have more food, but then the environment is also taking a toll. So as previously just said, there's some problems with mechanized agriculture. The first one is that there's large tracts of bare land that increases soil erosion. And then in addition, there's very little genetic differentiation or variation in the crops because we're doing monoculture. So this leads to an increase in pesticide use. When we don't rotate crops, it depletes the soil nutrients and thus increasing fertilizer use. So we see an increase in pesticide use here, we see an increase in fertilizer use here, and organisms are becoming resistant to pesticides. And we've talked about this. It's not like, poof, I need to be resistant. But instead, those that are not resistant die off, and what's left are the resistant ones that are able to reproduce. And so over time, we're changing those organisms that are pests. So the soil has two different categories of nutrients. The primary soil nutrients that are typically in short supply are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So we, as a shorthand, say NPK. These are the macronutrients, the elements that are used in large quantities, removed after each harvest. There are also micronutrients, which are chemical elements that are only used in small quantities, so boron and zinc, and they're removed after multiple croppings. So think macro, every year need to replace them, micro, every 3 to 5 years. So there are chemical and synthetic fertilizers that do not replace the soil organic matter, which are important for soil structure, and then no water holding ability like humus, and no micronutrients. So there's a really good interest for farmers, as you saw in previous videos, to actually build up the soil appropriately, not just using chemical and synthetic fertilizers. So in agriculture, we use pesticides to kill off pests, herbicides to kill off vegetables, and insecticides to kill off insects. So pesticides are used to kill or control populations of unwanted fungi, plants, animals. These can be divided into several categories based on what they control their target organism. So as I just mentioned, insecticides are used to control insect populations. So the number one insect population that a lot of farmers are concerned about are mosquitoes. And this is how DDT came to be, because mosquitoes carry over 30 diseases that are harmful to humans, including malaria. So DDT was thought to be a perfect insecticide because it killed off the mosquitoes. As a result, what we learned is that it was incredibly stable too stable, and as a result, we had it left in the ecosystem through bioaccumulation and biomagnification because it's fat soluble, and as a result, we saw the devastation that we did in eagles and in other birds and their eggs. So mosquitoes are a problem, and our first attempt at solving the mosquito problem was DDT. So the last slide we started talking about DDT, and that's a chlorinated hydrocarbon, which is a stable structure, long-lasting, persistent pesticide, and then tends to accumulate in the soil and the animal bodies. So think DDT here. Absolutely think DDT. The effect for long periods after application, and they affect many non-targeted organisms, which is key. And they are no longer used in most of the world. Many developing countries still use it to protect crops and public health, but we're trying to lean towards not using it anymore. Here's a picture of DDT in 1942, a chlorinated hydrocarbon. It was the first synthetic organic compound, and it's now banned. As you can see, here's the DDT truck, and the DDT truck is spraying DDT, and kids would chase it on bikes. It would be at the beach, everywhere, and as we learned that that's not such a great thing. So we have two other classifications of insecticides. We have organophosphates and carbamates. These are short-lived compounds, different from what we just talked about, and they do not persist in the environment, but they are generally more toxic to invertebrates. They work both by interfering with the ability of the nervous system to conduct impulses and interferes with neurotransmitters. Cotton uses 50% of the insecticides in the U.S. So if you chose organic cotton, you could actually make a difference in the amount of insecticides that are being used. Okay, our next category are herbicides. These are used to control unwanted plants. So farmers don't want certain plants in their crops. About 60% of pesticides are used in the U.S. So think of the umbrella term pesticides, and 60% of what's being used are herbicides. Weeds compete with crops for soil nutrients, and then that's not good for yield, so we want to eliminate them. Traditional weed control methods are expensive in terms of time and energy, so sending someone out there to weed their garden or weed bigger areas of land, not just a garden, it's much quicker to just spray a pesticide. A pesticide that's an herbicide. So fungicides and rodenticides, sides means to kill or death, so whatever's in front of it, you can try to figure out what they're killing. So fungicides are killing fungus, and these are important defenses against spoilage of seeds and manure in mature crops. And rhododendroncides go after rodents, so gophers, moles, things that destroy crops. And so these things go after those organisms.